The warrant was folded in my breast pocket, and I could feel it against my ribs like a second heartbeat the whole way up. 22 floors. The lift climbed them one at a time, a soft chime for each, and none of the four of us said a word. There is a particular silence a man learns to keep when he has spent his life standing still at a post, and I had spent more of my life at it than I liked to count. But this silence was different. This was the silence before a door opens and a thing that has been hidden for a long while stops being hidden. I had felt it exactly twice before in 20 years of service to the crown. I felt it now. My name is Warwick Thorne, and on the morning this story begins I was a serjeant at arms of the Royal Guard of the House of Harrogate, in my 43rd year, with a bad left knee and a clean record, and a document in my pocket signed by a magistrate 2 hours earlier. The document said we could go up. It said, in the careful language of the law, that there was reasonable ground to believe that property belonging to the estate of the late Queen Isolde, property missing for 11 months and presumed lost, stolen, or sold, was to be found in a residence at the top of a glass tower on the river, a residence held in the name of Lord Cassius Vale. I had known Lord Cassius since he was a boy of 9, sulking in the long gallery because his mother would not let him ride out with the older cousins. I had watched him grow into a young man who wore very good coats and owed money to a great many people, and smiled at all of them exactly the same amount. I had no personal quarrel with him. I want that understood before I tell you anything else. I did not go up that tower to ruin a man. I went up because a magistrate had signed a paper, and because the law, when it is any use at all, does not care whose son you are. The lift chimed the 22nd floor and stopped. "Ready, sergeant," said Constable Bede at my shoulder. He was the youngest of us, 26, and his voice was too eager. I put a hand flat against the lift wall to hold it a half-second longer. "We knock," I said. "We announce. We present the warrant. He reads it or he does not, that is his affair, but we give him the chance. Nobody raises a hand to him and nobody raises a voice. We are not thieves come to rob a thief. We are the crown come to take back what is the crown's. There is a difference, and it is the whole difference. Remember it." 3 of them nodded. Bede said, "Yes, sergeant," a beat late. The doors opened. The corridor beyond was carpeted so thickly our boots made no sound, and lit by little brass lamps set into the walls at intervals, and it smelled of some cold flower I could not name and did not like. There was one door at the end of it. It was black lacquer with a handle of brushed steel and no number, because when you own the entire top floor of a tower, you do not need a number. Everyone who comes to you knows where you are. I walked to it. I stood square in front of it, the way I have stood in front of 10,000 things in my life, and I raised my gloved hand and I knocked 3 times, hard, so the sound of it would carry. "Lord Cassius Vale," I said, and I pitched my voice to fill the corridor. "This is the Royal Guard, acting under warrant of the Crown Magistracy. Open the door." Nothing, the cold flower smell, the little brass lamps. I knocked again. "Lord Cassius, we hold a lawful warrant to enter and search these premises. You are required to admit us. Open the door, or it will be opened for you." And now there was a sound inside, a scrape, a soft footstep, the particular quiet of a man deciding whether he can pretend not to be home. I have heard that quiet before too. It never works. It only wastes everyone's morning. The door opened the width of a hand, held on a chain, and one gray eye and half a face looked out at me. It took him a moment to place me. Then it took him no time at all, and the half of his face I could see went from irritation to something colder and more careful. "Serjeant Thorne," said Lord Cassius, "you're a long way from the gate." "My lord," I held up the warrant so the seal was toward him. "You'll want to read this before you say anything else. Take your time, I'll wait. But the chain comes off the door either way." He did not take the chain off. He looked at the folded paper and he did not reach for it, and behind the careful cold of his face I saw the thing I had come up 22 floors to see, which was fear, quick and small and instantly mastered, but there. A man with nothing hidden does not feel that when the law knocks. He feels annoyed. He feels put upon. He does not feel the thing I saw move behind Lord Cassius Vale's gray eye. "This is an outrage," he said, very smoothly, mastering it. "Do you know whose house this is?" "I do, my lord. It's why I read the warrant twice before I signed for it. The chain, please." "My mother is not named on this warrant," I said. "You are, and the estate of the late Queen Isolde is. Now I'll ask you a third time, and a third time is all the law requires of me. Take the chain off the door." For a moment we simply looked at one another through the 4-inch gap, the old serjeant and the young lord, and I want to tell you what was in that moment, because everything that came after grew out of it. He was calculating. I could see him doing it, running through the men he could call, the names he could invoke, the mother upstairs at the palace who had made half the court afraid of her, the whole machinery of protection that had wrapped this young man since before he could walk. And I stood there and let him calculate because I already knew the sum. There was nothing at the end of his arithmetic. The warrant was good. The magistrate was clean. The men behind me were steady. And the thing he was afraid of was inside the flat, and he could not make it not be inside the flat by any name he could think of to shout. He took the chain off the door. I will tell you now how it began, 11 months before that corridor, because you cannot understand what we found in the penthouse unless you understand what was lost, and how it came to be lost, and how nearly everyone at court agreed to stop looking. The late Queen Isolde had been dead a little over a year. She had been King Alaric's first wife, and by every account I ever heard from those who served her, a better queen than the kingdom deserved and a kinder woman than the palace made room for. She had died slowly of the wasting sickness that no rank protects you from, and she had faced it the way she had faced everything, which was straight on and without complaint. In her last months she had done what careful people do. She had made her wishes plain. She had written them down, and she had, in particular, made provision for what was to become of her jewels. They were not the crown jewels. That distinction matters, and the whole case turned on it. The crown jewels belong to the office of the sovereign and pass from monarch to monarch, and no person owns them any more than a person owns the sea. But a queen accumulates over a life, her own jewels, gifts, inheritances, pieces made for her and her alone, and those are hers, personal property, hers to leave as she likes. Queen Isolde had a collection of such pieces, and among them were 3 that mattered above all the rest. There was the Isolde parure, a matched set, tiara and necklace and drop earrings, of old cut diamonds and pale water blue, aquamarines the color of the sky an hour before dawn, made for her marriage and worn at every great occasion of her reign. There was the Harrogate sapphire, a single stone the size of a thrush's egg, deep as a well, set in a pendant that had come down through her own mother's family, and had nothing whatever to do with the house of Harrogate despite its unlucky name. And there was a plain thing, the least valuable of the 3 and the one she had loved most, a locket of worn gold on a worn chain that held inside it 2 small portraits and had been given to her when she was a girl by a father everyone agreed she had adored. In her testament, Queen Isolde left the parure and the sapphire to be held in trust for her granddaughter, Princess Malin, who was 6 years old when the queen died and would come into them on her majority, and the locket she left to no institution and no trust at all. She left it to the child directly, with a line I have read myself in the copied testament, in her own failing hand. For Malin, who is not to wear it but to keep it, so that she will know she was loved by a woman she was too young to remember. That was the will. It was witnessed, it was lodged, it was, so far as the law was concerned, as solid as stone. And within a year of the queen's death, all 3 pieces, the parure, the sapphire, the little worn locket, were gone. I came into it sideways, the way a man of my rank comes into most things, which is to say by standing near a door while my betters talked on the other side of it and forgot I could hear. It was the master of the household who first said the word asterisk missing, and he said it low, in the small green room off the state library, to the Crown Prince Rowan, and I was posted outside the door, and I heard it through the door as clearly as if I had been in the room. Missing, and then a rustle of paper and Prince Rowan's voice, which I had known since he was a serious boy of 12, saying, "Missing how? A thing does not go missing out of a sealed strong room." "It was moved," the master said, "for the inventory. After her late majesty passed, it was all moved, everything to be catalogued and valued and assigned as the testament directs. Most of it went back. These 3 did not go back. They were signed out for valuation, and there the record simply stops." "Stops with whom?" And there was a pause on the other side of the door, a pause long enough that I understood before the master answered that the answer was going to be difficult, that it was going to be the kind of answer that makes powerful men reach for the word asterisk misunderstanding and hold on to it very hard. "The valuation was arranged," the master said carefully, "by the office of the Queen Consort, by Her Majesty Queen Morwenna's household." I had been a guardsman for a long time. I had learned over that long time to keep my face a wall no matter what came over it. I kept it a wall then in the corridor, staring at the far wainscoting. But inside the wall something went very still and very clear, the way the air goes before a storm you can already smell, and I thought, there it is. That is the shape of the thing. Now we will see who is willing to look at it. For 11 months the answer was, almost no one. Understand the position they were all in, and you will understand why. Queen Morwenna was the king's second wife. She had married King Alaric a scant 2 years after Queen Isolde was in the ground, and she had come to the marriage with 2 grown children of her own, Lord Cassius and Lady Verena, and an appetite for the standing that the crown could give them that no amount of feeding ever seemed to satisfy. She was clever. I will say that for her plainly, because it would be foolish and false to pretend otherwise. A fool would have been easier to stop. She was clever, and she was patient, and she had understood something about the court that the honest people in it kept failing to understand, which is that most men would rather live with a wrong than pay the price of naming it. So the jewels were asterisk missing, not stolen, missing, a regrettable administrative lapse. The valuers had been careless. The paperwork had been muddled in the confusion after a great lady's death. No doubt the pieces would turn up, filed under the wrong ledger, mislaid in the wrong vault. That was the story, and it was a good story, and the court took it up gratefully and wore it like a coat against the cold, because the alternative was to say aloud that the Queen Consort's household had made off with a dead woman's inheritance meant for a living child, and no one at court wanted to be the one who said that first. No one, that is, except a serious young man who had loved his mother, and an old serjeant with a bad knee who had heard the word asterisk missing through a door. Prince Rowan came to me 3 weeks after the day at the Green Room. He did not send for me. He came on foot to the guardroom by the east gate, at an hour when it was empty but for me and the duty ledger, and he sat down across the scarred oak table as though he were any man and not the heir to the throne, and he said, "Serjeant Thorne, you were outside the door." I did not insult him by pretending I did not know which door. I was, Your Highness. Then you heard it. I heard enough of it, sir. He turned a candle stub over in his fingers round and round, the way a man does when the thing he means to say is heavier than the words he has for it. "They want me to let it go," he said. "My father's advisers, the master, even," he stopped himself. "They tell me the pieces will surface. They tell me a public search would shame the household in a year. We cannot afford more shaming. They tell me my grandmother would not have wanted her memory made into a scandal." "And what do you tell them, sir?" "That my grandmother left a locket to a little girl," he said, "so that the girl would know she was loved, and that a locket is not a scandal. A locket is a promise, and I do not intend to be the man who let a promise to a 6-year-old dissolve because it was inconvenient to keep. I have served 4 monarchs and stood at the edge of a great many rooms, and I have heard a great many fine speeches, most of them made by men who forgot them by the following morning. I did not think Prince Rowan would forget his. There was a flatness in the way he said it, no theater in it at all, that told me he had already counted the cost and meant to pay it. "Then, sir," I said, "you'll want it done properly, not whispered about. Done in the light by the book so that when it is finished no one can say it was spite or politics. You'll want a paper trail cleaner than theirs. You'll want the law, sir, and not the palace." He looked at me for a long moment. "You've thought about this?" "I've done little else for 3 weeks, Your Highness." "Then think about it aloud." So I did. And that conversation, in an empty guardroom at the east gate by the light of a candle stub, is where the road to the 22nd floor truly began, not with a raid, but with a decision to do the patient, unglamorous, lawful thing, and to keep doing it no matter how many powerful voices called it a mistake. The patient thing was this: we would follow the paper. Not the whispers, not the gossip that ran under the palace like water under ice. Everyone had gossip, and gossip proves nothing and shames everyone. We would follow the actual documents, the signed-out slips and the valuer's dockets and the transport logs and the insurance schedules, the dull, unlovely paper that a scheme leaves behind because a scheme, however clever, still has to move real objects through real hands, and hands sign for things. It took months. I want to be honest about that, because the stories they tell afterward always make it sound quick, a bright, clean arrow from suspicion to justice, and it was nothing of the kind. It was slow. It was 100 small refusals and 100 locked cabinets and a dozen clerks who suddenly could not find files that had been on their shelves the week before. It was a valuation firm that had, most conveniently, dissolved itself 4 months after the Queen's death, its partners scattered, its records in storage, at an address that turned out to be a shuttered warehouse with a broken lock, and nothing inside but pigeon droppings and a single empty filing cabinet with the drawers pulled out. But paper is stubborn. That is its great virtue. You can hide a diamond in a wall, but you cannot unsign your name, and somewhere in the great slow river of documents, there is always a place where the water was diverted, and if you follow it long enough and refuse long enough to be turned back, you come to the diversion. We found ours in a shipping manifest. I should tell you who found it, because I did not find it alone, and the man who did most of the finding deserves his name in this. Her name, rather. She was a clerk of the Second Archive, Miss Wren Aldis, 29 years old. With ink-stained fingers and spectacles, she pushed up her nose 40 times an hour, and a memory for numbers that frightened people who had never seen a woman remember a number before. Prince Rowan had asked me whom in the household I trusted, truly trusted, to look at documents, and not lose their nerve when the documents pointed where nerve fails. I gave him 3 names. 2 of them, when it came to it, developed sudden and pressing reasons to be posted elsewhere. Wren Aldis did not. She said, when I put it to her plainly and told her plainly what it might cost her, "Serjeant, I have catalogued that woman's jewels twice with my own hands. I know every piece. If someone has walked off with the Queen's aquamarines, I should very much like to know where they walked to." And she pushed her spectacles up her nose and asked for the docket numbers. It was Wren who noticed that the valuation firm, the one that had so conveniently dissolved, had, before it vanished, arranged for the transport of unspecified insured goods to an address on the river. She noticed it because the insurance schedule listed the goods by weight and by declared value and not by name, which is a thing careful people do when they do not want a name written down. And the declared value on that one manifest was very large, and the weight was very small, and Wren Aldis knew, the way I know the drill of a changing of the guard, that a very small weight with a very large value is jewels and nothing else on this earth. The address on the river was a glass tower. The top floor of the glass tower was held in the name of Lord Cassius Vale. We had, at that moment, still nothing that would stand in a court. A manifest is a suggestion, not a proof. The goods were unspecified. The value could be anything. A clever advocate would have turned it into fog in an afternoon. So we did not go to the tower. We went on following paper. And over the following weeks the paper thickened around the tower the way frost thickens on a window. The transport company's driver's log, recovered from a depot the company had forgotten to have shredded, that placed a locked strongbox at the tower's loading dock on a night in the spring. The building's own concierge ledger, which we obtained lawfully, and which recorded a delivery to the Penthouse that same night, signed for by Lord Cassius himself in his own careless hand. An insurance renewal, taken out 3 months later by Lord Cassius on the contents of his residence, that valued those contents at a figure so far above what any young man's furniture could account for that the underwriter had queried it in a marginal note we could read. Each piece was small. Together they were a rope, and when the rope was strong enough, Prince Rowan and I took it, not to his father the king, and not to the household, and not to any voice at court that might warn the tower before we reached it. We took it to a magistrate. That was the whole of the strategy, and it was Rowan's, and I have always thought it was the wisest thing I ever watched a young man do. He did not use his rank. He could have. He was the heir. He could have sent guardsmen up that tower on nothing but his word, and half the court would have called it justice and the other half would have called it tyranny, and both halves would have been a little bit right, and the thing would have festered for a generation. He did not do that. He took the rope of paper to a magistrate who had never met him, laid it out, and asked the magistrate, not the prince, the magistrate, to decide whether there was ground to search. And the magistrate read the paper, all of it, over 2 long days, and at the end of the second day he took up his pen and signed the warrant. The warrant that was folded against my ribs in the lift. I have made the 2 days the magistrate spent reading sound like a formality, and I owe it to the truth to tell you they were the worst 2 days of the whole 11 months, because they were the 2 days the thing very nearly died. Word had got out. Not the whole of it, not the tower, not the wall, but the shape, that the prince's men had been pulling files, that an archivist had been asking questions, that a magistrate had a rope of paper on his desk with a lord's name at the end of it. A palace leaks the way a ship leaks. You plug one seam and the water finds another. And the moment the shape of the thing reached the court did what courts do, which is grow frightened of consequences it had not troubled to imagine while the wrong was merely being done. They came to Prince Rowan in a body, not the queen consort's people, that would have been simple, his own father's advisers, honest men, some of them, men I had known for years and did not think ill of. They came and they said all the reasonable things. That the king was old and the marriage was fragile, and a public accusation against the queen consort's son would tear the household in 2 in a year, the kingdom could not spare the tearing. That the evidence was strong but circumstantial, a rope of paper and no confession, and if the search found nothing, if the magistrate signed and the guards went up and came down empty, the prince would have staked the crown's dignity on a raid and lost it, and his enemies would feed on that for a decade. That it would be wiser, and here was the word that is always the most dangerous word in a palace, wiser, to let it lie, to let the pieces surface quietly as such things did, to keep the peace. I was in the room for that, standing at the wall where I stand, and I watched them lay the reasonable, wise, ruinous thing in front of a young man who was tired, who had spent a winter braiding paper, whose father he loved and did not want to shame, and I watched them offer him the middle road, the one that costs nothing today and everything slowly, and I want to tell you that I saw him tempted. I did. It would be a lie to make him a saint who felt no pull. He was young and worn, and they were his father's men, and they were not wrong that it would be easier. There was a long moment in that room when the whole thing hung on the tiredness of one young man, and I could not speak, because it was not my place to speak, and I stood at the wall and held my face still and hoped. And Rowan said, You keep saying the pieces will surface quietly. Say the last one. Say the locket surfaces quietly. Say a worthless little locket that my grandmother left to my daughter so she'd know she was loved surfaces quietly in some ledger 3 years from now when my daughter is old enough to have stopped waiting for it. Tell me that's wisdom, and I'll let it lie. And no one in that room would say it, because it was not sayable, and the reasonable men looked at their hands, and the middle road closed. That was the false dawn, or the false dusk, rather, the moment the easy wrong nearly won by wearing the face of prudence. It did not win. But it came near, and I have never forgotten how near, and how thin the thread was that a whole justice hung on. One tired young man refusing to be wise in the way that costs a child. There was one more blow before the magistrate signed, and it fell on the one of us who could least afford it. Ren Aldous came to me the second morning, white to the lips, and told me that she had been visited, nothing said outright, nothing a court could touch, only a caller from a certain household, very pleasant, who had mentioned in passing what a precarious thing a clerk's position was, how easily a career of quiet work could be undone by a rumor, how much a young woman with no family behind her had to lose by attaching herself to a losing cause. It was a threat wrapped in silk, and it was aimed exactly, and it would have turned a lesser person. "They want me to be afraid," she said. Her voice shook, and she was furious that it shook, and she pushed her spectacles up her nose. "And I am afraid, serjeant. I'll not pretend I'm not. I could lose everything I've worked for." "You could," I said. I did not insult her by pretending otherwise. The fear was real and earned. "So could I, so could the prince. That's the price they've set, and they've set it high on purpose because they know most people won't pay it. That's the whole of how they've kept the thing buried 11 months, not by hiding it well, but by making the price of digging it up more than most people will pay." I looked at her. "You catalogued that locket. You know who it's for. You don't have to be unafraid, Miss Aldous. You only have to do the right thing while afraid, which is the only kind of courage there is. The other kind is just not understanding the danger." She was quiet a moment. Then she pushed her spectacles up her nose one more time and said, "Well, I've read that inscription now. Keep faith. It would be a poor thing to have read it and then not." And she stayed. She stayed, and she was there in the corridor the day we went up, and she knelt on that hard floor and named the parure, and if she had run, and no one would have blamed her, and no court could have made her stay, the whole thing would have failed for want of a witness whose word an advocate could not paint. It held because she held. Justice is not one great deed by one great person. It is a great many ordinary people each declining, at the cost of something, to run. The magistrate signed at the end of the second day. That is why, when Lord Cassius Vale looked at me through a 4-inch gap in his door and reached for the name of his mother, it did him no good. His mother was not on the paper. His mother could not unsign a concierge's ledger. For 11 months the scheme had lived in the one place schemes love best, which is the soft country of everyone agreeing not to look. And we had walked it, patiently, out of that soft country and onto the hard ground of a signed warrant, where names and mothers and fear behind a gray eye do not matter, and only what is written and what is true. He took the chain off the door, and I stepped inside. The penthouse was the kind of place that is designed to make a visitor feel small, and does it very well. The ceilings went up and up. One whole wall was glass, floor to that far ceiling, and beyond it the river lay gray and flat under a low sky, and the toy city crawled at the foot of the tower, and you understood at once that a man who lived here spent his days looking down. The floors were pale stone, polished so that our reflections walked upside down beneath us. There was very little furniture, and all of it was low and hard and expensive, the sort of furniture that is not for sitting in but for being seen not sitting in. There were no books. I noticed that. A great glass room at the top of the world, and not one book in it. Only a long console of pale wood along one wall bearing 3 or 4 objects placed at wide intervals, each lit from above by its own small light, the way things are lit in a museum, so that you would look at them and understand that they were worth looking at. None of the museum objects was a queen's jewel. I checked. That is not where a man hides a thing. A man hides a thing where the eye slides off it, not where the light points. Lord Cassius had stepped back to the middle of the great room and stood there with his arms folded and his chin up, having decided, I think, on dignity, the wounded aristocrat, submitting under protest to the indignities of little men. He had put on the manner the way another man puts on a coat. It was a good manner. He had been raised in it. But I had watched the fear move behind his eye at the door, and a manner put on over fear is a coat with a hole in it, and if you know where the hole is you are never fooled by the coat. You'll ruin nothing, he said. You'll break nothing. I'll be watching every one of you and I'll have the cost of every scratch. Nothing will be broken that isn't opened lawfully, my lord, I said. You have my word, and my word is on the warrant. Constable Bede, the log. Bede took out the search log and the pen. This is a thing few people understand about a lawful search, and it is the thing that separates it from a robbery. It is written down, everything. Every room we entered, the time we entered it, the state we found it in, every drawer opened and closed, every object touched. Not because the law loves paper for its own sake, but because a search that is written down is a search that can be answered for afterward in the daylight before anyone who cares to ask. And a man who does his work as though he will have to answer for it in daylight does different work than a man who believes no one will ever ask. I have always done my work as though I would have to answer for it. It is, I think, the whole of what discipline is. We begin at the far wall and work back to the door, I said to my three. 2 of you to a room, never one alone, so that no man can ever be accused of putting a thing in his pocket, because 2 men saw everything. We open, we look, we close, we log, we move on. We do not tear, we do not throw. We are careful men doing careful work, and if it takes all day, it takes all day. Begin. And we began. I will not walk you through every room because a search is, most of it, tedious, and tedium does not tell a story. But I will tell you what a search feels like from the inside, because I think people imagine it wrong. They imagine it fast and violent, cushions flung, drawers appended. It is nothing like that, or should not be. It is slow. It is patient. It is a great deal of kneeling on hard floors with a pain in a bad knee, running gloved fingers along the undersides of things, tapping walls with 2 knuckles, and listening, really listening, for the tiny change in a wall's voice that says there is a space behind it that should not be there. Because that is the truth of hiding a valuable thing, and any honest guardsman or any honest thief will tell you the same. You cannot make a valuable thing disappear. You can only make it hard to find. And hard to find always means a space carved out where no space should be, and a space carved out where no space should be always changes something. It changes the weight of a drawer. It changes the sound of a wall. It changes the depth of a cupboard so that the inside is shorter than the outside by a hand's breadth, by 2 fingers, by just enough. The man who hides the thing knows exactly where the discrepancy is and trains his own eye to slide over it. The searcher's whole art is to find the place the owner's eye slides over, and to stop there, and to look. So we looked. Constable Bede and Guardsman Fenn took the bedchambers. Guardsman Oster took the kitchen and the service passage with me. Lord Cassius trailed us from room to room with his folded arms, saying little, and the little he said was calculated to unsettle. You know this is her doing, of course, he said, as I knelt to look under the great cold slab of the kitchen island. The prince. He's wanted me gone from the day his father remarried. This is how a weak man does it. He sends other men up a tower to paw through my drawers because he hasn't the spine to face me himself. I did not answer. It is not the searcher's place to argue the case. The case answers itself, or it does not. I ran my fingers along the underside of the island's overhang and found nothing but cold stone and dust, and I logged it, and I moved on. You served my mother's household, he said, following. You'll be back at a gate in the rain by winter, Thorn. You know that. You've picked the wrong side of this and you're too old to pick another." "I've picked the side with the warrant on it, my lord," I said, and rose, my knee cracking like a dropped plate, and went on to the pantry. He fell quiet after that for a while. But I noticed it the way you notice a change in the wind before you can name it, that as we moved through the flat, from the kitchen toward the great room and the study beyond, Lord Cassius grew not more agitated but more calm. Which is wrong. A man being searched grows tenser as the searchers near what he fears and looser as they move away from it. Lord Cassius had been tight as a wire at the door and in the kitchen, and now, as we approached the study, the room a man would think most likely to hold a hidden safe, the room with the heavy desk and the paneled walls, he was easing, breath by breath, into something that was almost pleasure. He wanted us to search the study. He was looking forward to it. Which told me, as clearly as if he had said it, that the thing was not in the study. I said nothing. I let Oster and me go through the study exactly as thoroughly as every other room, because a search you shortcut is a search a clever advocate unravels, and because I did not want Lord Cassius to know that I had read his ease. We tapped the paneling. We found behind a hinged section of it precisely what he wanted us to find: a wall safe, a good one, steel-doored, sunk into the masonry. "There it is," said Bede from the doorway, and I heard the young man's whole body lean toward it. "There it is," I agreed mildly. "Open it, my lord." Lord Cassius Vale smiled, the first real smile I had seen from him, and gave me the combination without a moment's hesitation, and I turned the dial, and the heavy door swung open on oiled hinges, and inside was a great deal of money in banded notes, and a passport and some deeds and a man's watch and a sealed letter, and no jewels at all. No parure, no sapphire, no worn gold locket, nothing of Queen Isolde's, nothing whatever. "Satisfied?" said Lord Cassius, and the pleasure in his voice was warm now, unmistakable. He had done it. He had spent good money. I could see it in the safe's make. To build the obvious hiding place, the safe a searcher's whole training points him toward, and he had put nothing in it that could touch him. And now the warrant would come up empty, and the story of the asterisk missing jewels would go on being the story of the merely missing jewels. And Prince Rowan would be the weak man who had raided a lord's home on suspicion and found only his laundry, and I would be at a gate in the rain by winter. Exactly as promised. I stood in front of the open safe, and my 3 men looked at me, and Lord Cassius looked at me, and for a moment the whole room hung on what the old serjeant with the bad knee would do next. I logged the safe, contents examined, no relevant property recovered, time noted. And then I closed it, and I turned around and I said to Lord Cassius Vale very evenly, "Thank you, my lord. Now we'll search the rest." I watched the pleasure go out of his face, and I confess to you that I took no joy in it, though a lesser man might have. It is a hard thing to watch a man realize he has been too clever. It is like watching a man who has built a beautiful bridge stand on it and hear the first crack. "You've searched the rest," he said. "There is nothing in the rest. You've turned my whole house over. It's finished, sergeant, go home." "We've searched the rooms," I said. "We haven't searched the house." "There's a difference, my lord, and it is nearly the whole difference, the same as the difference between a thief and the crown, and I'll tell you what it is if you'll indulge an old man a moment, for I think you'll want to hear it." He said nothing, which I took for indulgence. "A house isn't its rooms," I said. "A house is its rooms and everything between them. It's the space inside the walls and under the floors and above the false ceilings. It's the thickness the builder gives a partition that the eye takes for solid. When you told me the combination of that safe so quickly and so gladly, my lord, you taught me 2 things. You taught me that the jewels are not in the safe. And you taught me that you are a man who thinks ahead and plans and spends money to make a searcher look where you want him to look. A careless man I'd worry about. A careless man might have the things in a shoebox under the bed, and we'd have found them in the first 10 minutes and been gone by noon. But you are not careless. You are careful and clever, and you have had 11 months and a great deal of money. And a careful, clever man with 11 months and a great deal of money does not hide a queen's jewels in a room. He hides them in the house. Constable Bede, God bless the boy, said, "Sergeant, we can't tear the walls down. The warrant says we may enter and search," I said. "It does not say we may only look in drawers, but you're right that we do not tear." "We do not need to tear, we need to listen." I turned back to Lord Cassius. "You'll want to sit down, my lord, this part is slow." And I began, with 2 knuckles, to walk the walls. Here is the thing about a wall that has a space behind it. It lies to your eyes and tells the truth to your ear. A solid wall rapped with 2 knuckles answers with a short, dead, flat sound, a asterisk talk that stops the instant it starts, because there is nothing behind it for the sound to move into. A wall with a hollow behind it answers differently. It answers with a fractional ring, a took with the faintest tail on it, a sound that is a hair's breadth longer and a shade higher, because behind it there is air, and air gives sound somewhere to go. The difference between the two is so small that a man not listening for it will never hear it in his life. And a man who has spent 30 years standing very still in very quiet places, with nothing to do for hours on end, but attend to the smallest sounds the world makes. A man like that hears it the way you hear your own name spoken across a crowded room. I walked the great room first. Talk, talk, talk. Solid, all of it, real masonry, real stone and honest wall. I walked the study. Solid, save the cavity of the safe, which rang exactly as a safe should. I walked the bedchambers, Bede and Finn following me now in a silence that had changed its quality. The boy's eagerness burned off and something steadier under it. Solid, solid, solid. Lord Cassius sat, as I had suggested, on one of the low hard chairs, and watched me knuckle his walls, and did not speak. And this is the part I want you to hold on to, did not fidget. He sat very still. He had gone still the way I go still. And a man who has been mocking you all morning and then goes still and quiet and watchful when you start doing a particular thing is a man telling you, without a word, that you have begun to do the thing he is afraid of. So I did not hurry, and I did not stop. I came at last to the dressing room off the great bedchamber, a long, narrow room. Walls hung floor to ceiling on both sides with cabinets of pale wood, the doors flush and handleless, opening at a touch. Behind each door hung the man's clothes, and there were a great many clothes, ranks and ranks of very good coats. Bede and Finn had been through these already in the first pass. The log said so. Every cabinet opened, every shelf looked over, nothing found. And it was true. There was nothing in the cabinets. But I did not knuckle the cabinet doors. I knuckled the wall asterisk between asterisk 2 cabinets, the narrow strip of pale paneling, no wider than my hand, that ran floor to ceiling between one bank of cabinets and the next, the kind of strip your eye passes over 1,000 times and never sees, because it is doing nothing. It is only the seam where 2 things meet. Talk asterisk said the first strip, solid. Talk asterisk said the second, solid. Took asterisk said the third with a tail on it, hollow. I did not stop. I did not let my face change. I had a lifetime of not letting my face change. I moved on to the 4th strip, talk asterisk solid, and the 5th and the 6th, working the whole length of the room so that if Lord Cassius were watching my hands, and I knew that he was, he would not be able to say which strip had answered wrong, because I gave the wrong one no more of my attention than the right ones. I logged nothing yet. I finished the room. And only when I had wrapped every strip and every panel and come back to the door did I turn, quite casually, to Constable Bede and say, "The 3rd seam from the window. Bring the light." Lord Cassius stood up. "You've no cause," he said, and his voice had a crack in it now, the first real crack. "That's a wall. You'll not take a wall apart on a asterisk sound asterisk. Thorn, on some noise you say you heard some. There's no cause, you found nothing. You've turned over my whole life and found nothing. And now you'll pretend a wall rang wrong so you can save your prince's face." "I'll not take it apart at all," I said. I told you we don't tear, Constable, the seam. Bede brought the lamp close and knelt and ran his gloved fingertips down the third seam slowly, as I had taught him, feeling for the thing the eye does not see, and near the bottom, a hand's height off the floor, his fingers stopped. He looked up at me. "There's a join here, Sergeant," he said very quietly. "Not a seam. A join. It's made to look like a seam, but it's how it moves, it gives." "Then let it give," I said, gently. "We open what opens, we tear nothing." And Constable Bede, 26 years old, with his too eager voice gone entirely still, pressed his thumb against the false seam in the wall of a lord's dressing room, and the panel gave with a soft catch click, the sound of a well-made secret opening the way it was built to open, and a section of the wall the width of my hand, and the height of a door swung silently outward on a hidden hinge. Behind it was a space that should not have been there, and in the space, in the dark, catching the lamplight and throwing it back cold and blue and old, was a queen's ransom of hidden light. No one in that room moved for the space of 3 breaths. I counted them. I count things in hard moments. It is how I keep my hands steady. The space behind the panel was lined, I saw, with dark felt, made with care, a jeweler's cabinet built into a wall by a man who understood how to protect what he stored. And in it, laid out on the felt in shallow-fitted trays, was Queen Isolde's stolen light. The parure lay across the top tray, all 3 pieces of it together, the tiara with its old-cut diamonds and its aquamarines the color of the sky an hour before dawn, exactly that color, so that I understood for the first time why the Queen had loved them, because they held in them the 1 hour of the day when the world has not yet decided what it will be, the necklace to match, the drop earrings beside it in their little velvet nests. Below that tray in its own, the Harrogate sapphire hung on its chain, the single stone deep as a well, so dark a blue it was almost black until the light took it, and then it was blue all the way down, a blue with no bottom to it. I had seen these things before, from a distance, at coronation and at funeral, hung on a living queen. I had never stood a hand's breadth from them. They were close to almost unbearable, the way certain true things are unbearable close to. And on the lowest tray, set apart from the rest alone, was the locket. The worn gold locket on the worn gold chain, the least of them by any jeweler's reckoning. You could have bought 100 of it for the price of 1 aquamarine, and it was the one my eye went to and stayed on, because I knew what it was for. It was for a little girl. It was a dead grandmother's promise to a granddaughter she would never see grown, so that she will know she was loved by a woman she was too young to remember. And Lord Cassius Vale had taken even that. He had taken the diamonds and the sapphire, which was greed, and one can nearly understand greed. Greed is an old plain human sin. But he had taken the locket too. He had reached past its worthlessness and taken it and shut it in a wall, a promise to a 6-year-old, and left the child with nothing to keep. And I found, standing there, that of all of it, that was the thing I could not forgive. The diamonds were the theft. The locket was the cruelty. And I have hated a good many things in my life, but I am not sure I ever hated one quite as cleanly as I hated, in that moment, the small, mean thoroughness of a man who would lock away a child's locket to be sure she had nothing at all. I did not touch any of it. This matters, and I want it on the record. I did not lift so much as the chain of the locket with my own hand. "Constable Bede," I said, and my voice came out level, which surprised me. "Do not touch the recess. Log it exactly as it stands, the panel, the catch, the felt, each piece where it lies." Guardsman Fenn, the case with the plates. Fenn brought the flat case and set it down and opened it, and inside were the photographic plates and the camera, because a lawful recovery is photographed before it is moved, every piece where it was found, so that no man can ever stand up in a court and say the guards brought the jewels with them and staged the finding. We photographed the recess closed. We photographed it open. We photographed each tray, each piece, from 3 sides, with Bede's gloved hand holding a numbered card beside it, and every plate fin logged by number against the search log, and only when the whole of it was recorded 3 times over did I permit a single piece to be lifted, and even then it was not lifted by a guardsman. "Miss Aldous," I said to the doorway, and Wren Aldous came in. She had ridden up in a second car and waited by arrangement in the corridor, because I had known, we had all known, planning this in the empty guardroom, that if we found anything, the one person who must formally identify it was not a guard, whose word an advocate could paint as the prince's creature, but the archivist who had catalogued the pieces twice with her own hands and had the descriptions filed and witnessed years before this morning. So it was Wren Aldous, in her plain coat with her ink-stained fingers, who knelt on the hard, pale floor beside the open wall and pushed her spectacles up her nose and looked, and I watched her go very white and then very steady. "That's the parure," she said quietly. "Old-cut brilliants, aquamarines, the tiara reset in the 2nd year of her reign. You can see the join at the back of the frame here. I logged that join myself. That's the Harrogate sapphire. The stone is there's a flaw, a feather, low in the table. I have it drawn in the catalogue. And that," her voice caught only a little and then went on, "that is the locket. Late Queen Isolde's locket. It opens. There are 2 portraits inside, a man and a woman, and an inscription on the inside of the cover. May I?" "With gloves," I said. "For the plate." She drew on the cotton gloves Fenn handed her, and lifted the locket, the first of the 3 pieces any of us touched, and the least valuable, and I have always been glad it was that one, glad the first of the Queen's things to be lifted back into the light was the promise and not the price of it, and she found the catch, and the locket opened. And inside were the 2 little portraits, faded, a man and a woman long dead. And inside the cover, engraved so small you had to bring it to the lamp, was a line of words. Wren Aldous read them, and her steadiness finally broke, just for a moment, just around the eyes. "It says," she read, "keep this and keep faith." Lord Cassius Vale had not spoken since the panel opened. I turned to look at him and found that he had sat back down without my noticing on the low, hard chair, and that the manner, the good coat of the wounded aristocrat, had slid entirely off him, and what was under it was not the fear I had seen at the door and not the calm I had seen before the study. It was nothing at all. He was empty-faced. He was looking at the open wall the way a man looks at a thing that has finished happening to him. "They're not mine," he said. It came out flat and automatic, a reflex with no belief behind it. "No, my lord," I agreed. "They are not. I don't know how this is a plant. You put them there, your prince." "Miss Aldous catalogued these pieces years ago," I said. "The descriptions are lodged and witnessed. The recess was photographed before it was touched. The panel opened to Constable Bede's hand from your dressing-room wall, in your residence, on a warrant sworn to a magistrate who has never met the prince and does not care to. There is no version of this, my lord, in which anyone put anything anywhere but you. I think you know that. I think you have known it since the seam rang wrong. So I'll not stand here and trade you did and I didn't asterisk with you, because it's beneath both of us and there's a lady in the room. I'll only tell you what happens now, plainly, so you're not surprised by any of it." He looked at me. There was, in the empty face, one last flicker of the old calculation, the reflex to reach for a name, his mother's name, the machinery of protection. And then even that went out, because he had understood at last the thing that the whole 11 months of scheming had been built to avoid understanding, that the machinery does not reach up a tower after a signed warrant, that the soft country of everyone agreeing not to look has a border, and he had just been carried across it, and on this side of the border there was only what was written and what was true, and both of them were against him. "What happens now?" he said, dull. "Now," I said, "the property is recovered, sealed, photographed, and carried down from here in the presence of 2 guardsmen and the archivist who identified it, to be lodged with the court that issued the warrant, not with the palace and not with the prince. Now the search log and the plates go to the same court. And now, my lord, you'll come down with us. Not under any hand, no one will touch you. You'll walk down as a gentleman walks, to answer to a magistrate for how the personal property of the late Queen Isolde, left in trust to a child, came to be sealed inside your wall. That is what happens now. It is slow, and it is written down, and there is no name in the world you can say that will stop it. I am sorry for you in a way. But I am not sorry I came up. We were met on the ground floor by the Queen Consort. I do not know how she knew. I have wondered since, and the likeliest answer is the plainest, that a tower has a concierge, and a concierge has a telephone, and a woman like Morwenna keeps eyes in a great many places and pays them well. Somewhere between the 22nd floor and the ground, word had run down ahead of us, and she had come, not sent, come, in a plain dark car with the windows tinted, and she was standing in the marble lobby when the lift doors opened, and there were two men with her, large men, the kind of men who stand behind a person to make a point. She was magnificent. I will grant her that too, the same as I granted her cleverness, because to grant an enemy nothing is to lie about him, and I have tried in this account not to lie. She was tall and still and dressed in dark colors, and she wore no jewels at all, which was itself a kind of statement, and she looked at her son first, one look, quick, that took in the whole of it, the flat empty face, the guardsmen either side of him, and I watched her read the situation entire in that one look, faster than any of the men at court had read it in 11 months. Then she looked at me. "Serjeant Thorne," she said. Her voice was low and pleasant, and there was a blade in the middle of it. "Whatever you imagine you have found, you will put it back, and you will leave my son's home, and we will speak no more of this morning. I am giving you, now, the one chance you will get to keep your position and your pension. I would take it if I were a man of your years. Here is the moment I have been asked about more than any other in the time since. People want to know what it feels like. They want to know whether I was afraid, standing in that marble lobby with the Queen Consort in front of me and her two large men, and the whole weight of the palace behind her voice, holding a case of jewels that could end her family. And the honest answer is that I was not afraid, and I want to explain why, because it is the true center of this whole account, and it is the one thing I would want a young guardsman to take from it. I was not afraid because it was not any longer up to me. That is what the law is asterisk for. That is the entire good of it. A guardsman standing alone on his honor against a queen is a brave man and a doomed one. His honor is real, but it has no weight in the world, and she can break him, and the honor changes nothing. But a guardsman standing on a warrant is not standing alone and is not standing on his honor. He is standing on a document that a magistrate signed after 2 days of reading, lodged with a court that the Queen Consort cannot enter, backed by photographic plates and a witness catalog, and a search log written in daylight. And none of that can be unsigned or unwitnessed or unphotographed by any name she can say. Because the whole point of doing it lawfully, the whole slow, unglamorous point, is that once it is done it does not depend on the courage of the man who did it. I could have dropped dead in that lobby of my bad heart, and it would have changed nothing. The plates were already made. The property was already recovered under seal. Ren Aldous had already spoken the words that is the parure in front of 2 guardsmen. It was out of my hands and into the hands of the law, which was exactly where Prince Rowan and I had spent 11 patient months putting it, precisely so that it would not come down in the end to whether one old man in a lobby was brave enough. So I was not brave. I was only correct, which is a quieter thing and a stronger one. "Your Majesty," I said, and I inclined my head the exact degree her rank required and not 1 degree more, "I can put nothing back. The property has been recovered under a lawful warrant, photographed, sealed, and identified. It is no longer mine to move. It belongs now to the court that issued the warrant, and I could not return it to that wall if you commanded me on your knees, because the moment it was recovered it stopped being a thing anyone in this lobby has the power to hide again. As for my position and my pension, they were never the price of this, your Majesty. I'd have done it for nothing, and I have very nearly been paid nothing my whole life, so it's a wage I'm used to." Her face did not change, but something in the room changed. I felt it. The two large men felt it. Everyone in that marble lobby felt the small, cold click of a thing that had always worked no longer working. She had reached, as her son had reached, for the machinery of protection, and her hand had closed on air. "You have made an enemy today," she said very softly. "No, Your Majesty," I said. "I've made a record. There's a difference, and I've spent all morning explaining differences, so I'll not weary you with another. Guardsmen, bring his lordship down. Miss Aldous, the case. We're going to the court." And we walked past her, out of the marble lobby into the gray river light, and she did not stop us, because there was nothing left in her whole clever arsenal with which to stop a sealed case and a signed warrant, and she knew it. And this is the thing I will remember of her. She stood very straight and let us pass and did not lower herself to a scene, and I understood that she was already, behind her still face, doing the next arithmetic, the arithmetic of a losing position. Working out what could yet be saved. She was that sort. She did not fall apart. She was already fighting the next battle before this one had finished landing. But this one had finished landing, and no arithmetic could unland it. I told you at the start that I did not go up the tower to ruin a man, and that was true, and I will tell you now what the law did with Lord Cassius Vale, because ruin is a strong word, and the truth is both harder and fairer than ruin. He was not thrown in a dungeon. We are not, whatever the old songs say, a kingdom of dungeons any more, and it would flatter him to pretend he suffered like a hero of a ballad. What happened to him was worse than a dungeon, for a man like him, and more just. He was brought before the magistracy in open session, in daylight, before anyone who cared to attend, and a great many cared to attend. And the record was laid out, plate by plate and docket by docket, the whole rope of paper that Wren Aldous and I had spent the winter braiding. The shipping manifest with its small weight and its great value, the driver's log, the concierge ledger with his own careless signature, the insurance renewal the underwriter had queried, the photographs of a queen's jewels sealed in the wall of his dressing room. There was no fog an advocate could raise over it, though his advocate, who was expensive, tried. You cannot make a signed ledger into fog, and the magistracy was not a place his mother's blade of a voice could reach. He was found to have received and concealed property he knew to be the late Queen Isolde's, property held in trust by the testament for the Princess Malin, and he was ordered to answer for it in full. The pieces restored to the trust, the costs of the recovery laid at his door, and his name struck from the roll of those permitted at court, which for a man who had spent his life measuring his worth by his nearness to the crown was the heaviest stroke of all. He kept his liberty. He kept, after the costs, rather little else, and he went, in the end, quite quietly, the way a man goes when the thing he built his whole life on turns out to have been the good opinion of people who no longer hold it. I passed him once, months after, in a street far from the palace, and he did not look at me, and I did not look at him, and I thought there was nothing to say between us that the record had not already said better. The queen consort was harder, and I will not pretend to you that she was undone the way her son was undone. She was cleverer than her son, and she had kept her own hands off the wall. There was no signed ledger with her name on it, only the shape of the thing, only the fact that the valuation had been arranged by her household and the jewels had ended in her son's wall, and the shape of a thing, however plain to every eye, is not the same in law as a signature. She was not brought before the magistracy. She kept her title and her rooms. But something had changed, and everyone at court could feel it, the way you feel the turn of a season before you can point to the day it turned. For 11 months she had ruled the palace by the soft law of everyone agreeing not to look, and that law was broken now, publicly, in daylight, by a warrant and a wall and an old serjeant, and once it is broken it cannot be mended. Men who had been afraid of her found, to their own surprise, that they were a little less afraid. The master of the household, who had once said asterisk missing so carefully, began saying other things less carefully. King Alaric, who was old, and had loved his first wife, and had married his second in loneliness and been slower than he should have been to see what she was. King Alaric read the whole record himself, every plate, and I am told sat a long time with the photograph of the locket in his hand, the locket with "Keep this," and "Keep faith" engraved inside it in the hand of a wife 11 years in her grave. What passed between the king and the queen consort after that is not mine to know, and would not be mine to tell if I knew it, but she was never again quite the power she had been. The border had been drawn. She could not cross back over it, and she was not the sort to weep about a border. She simply lived from then on the smaller side of it, and fought her smaller battles there, and that was as near to justice as the law could reach her, and it would have to serve. I have made my peace with that. Justice is not always the whole loaf. Sometimes it is only the crust, and you learn to be glad of the crust because the child got her bread. For that is the ending that matters, and I have kept it for last on purpose. The parure and the sapphire went where the testament sent them, into the trust, to be held for the Princess Malin until her majority, locked away properly this time, catalogued by Reine Aldis herself, who took, I think, a particular grim satisfaction in filing the pieces back where they belonged with the flaw in the sapphire drawn again in her own neat hand. Malin will come into them when she is grown. She will wear the aquamarines one day at some great occasion of a reign not yet begun, and I hope she wears them well, and I hope someone tells her when she does that they were nearly lost, and that a clerk and an old guardsman and a serious young prince refused, for 11 stubborn months, to let a promise dissolve because it was inconvenient. But the locket did not go into any trust. The locket was not to be held for her majority. The testament said so in the queen's own failing hand for Malin, who is not to wear it but to keep it so that she will know she was loved by a woman she was too young to remember. Not to wear, to keep, to have, now. And so when the court had done with it as evidence, and the plates were filed and the record closed, it was returned not to a vault but to the child, directly, exactly as a dying grandmother had asked, 11 months late and none the worse for the wait. I was there when it was given to her. Prince Rowan asked me to be, and I could not have said no to him, though I am not a man for such rooms. It was a small room, a private one, only the prince and the Princess Malin, who was 7 by then, having had a birthday in the long winter of the search, and myself, standing at the door where I am comfortable, at the edge of things, where a guardsman belongs. Rowan knelt down to his daughter's height and opened his hand, and the worn gold locket lay in his palm on its worn gold chain, and he told her, in words simpler than any I have set down here, that it had been her great-grandmother's, that her great-grandmother had wanted her to have it, and that it had been kept safe for her all this while by good people, and that inside were 2 faces from long ago and a line of words. The child took it in both hands, the way children take a thing they understand to be important without quite knowing why. She worked the catch. It took her 3 tries, and no one helped her, and I was glad no one helped her, and it opened, and she looked a long while at the 2 faded faces, and then at the little words engraved inside the cover, which she was old enough to read. "Keep this," she read slowly, "and keep faith." And then, because she was 7, and because the young are wiser than we credit, she looked up at her father and asked, "What does keep faith mean?" And Prince Rowan, who had spent 11 months and a great deal of himself learning the answer, said, "It means you don't stop doing the right thing just because it's hard or slow or nobody's watching. It means you keep the promise even when keeping it costs you something. Your great-grandmother kept faith with everyone she loved. That's why she wanted you to have this, so you'd remember to keep faith too." The child considered this with great seriousness. Then she put the chain over her own head, though the testament said she was not to wear it, and I saw the prince decide, in the space of a heartbeat, not to correct her, that a grandmother who wrote asterisk so that she will know she was loved would forgive a 7-year-old for loving it back too much on the first day. The locket hung nearly to the child's waist, far too big for her, worn gold on a plain wool dress. She held it flat against herself with one hand. "I'll keep faith," she told her father, and she meant it the way only the young can mean a thing entirely, with nothing held back. I stood at the door and kept my face a wall, because a guardsman keeps his face a wall, and I have kept mine a wall through coronations and funerals and worse mournings than I can tell you. I kept it a wall then too. But I will confess to you, at the very end of this account and to no one else, that it was the hardest wall I ever held, and that when I went back down to my post at the gate that afternoon, and stood my long still hours in the gray light with the river going by, I found I did not mind the cold at all. They will tell the story wrong, of course. They already do. They will say the guards asterisk stormed the tower, kicked the door, tore the walls, snatched the jewels in a single glorious minute. It makes a better story that way, I suppose. It is not what happened. What happened was slower and smaller and better than that. A clerk who remembered a number, a prince who would not let go of a promise, a magistrate who read the paper twice, and an old man who knew that a wall with a space behind it lies to your eyes and tells the truth to your ear, and who had spent 30 years learning to listen for the truth, and stood still, and refused to stop listening until a false seam rang wrong. That is the whole of it. There was no storm. There was only the law done patiently in the light by people who kept faith. And a locket come home to a child 11 months late, with a promise inside it kept. I would go up the tower again tomorrow. I would go up 1,000 towers. But I hope I never have to. I hope, more than I can say, that the next promise a queen makes to a child is one that no one ever tries to lock inside a wall, and that a child gets to keep it from the first day, and never knows there was a winter when good people had to fight to give her what was already hers. That is a better kingdom than the one I served in, but it is the kingdom we were building, that winter, one dull page of paper at a time. And I think, on the whole, we built it.